Hello, I'm Phil Last, and the update thing is a bit odd, really, because some of you will know nothing about it. Uh, Nothing much is changing at the moment, so in terms of updates, it's probably the wrong name for the talk. But anyway, um, I'll start by explaining to people who might not know what it is. In the middle of 2007, I started working for Paul Mansour on his FlipDB project, and the way we were exchanging code was via email. Um, uh, Paul would send a workspace by email. I would cut and paste changes into an email, send them back to him, and he might or might not cut and paste them back into the workspace. And that was it. That was how it worked or not. And after about 6 months of relative unproductivity, I suggested to Paul that he needed some kind of code management. He asked me, could I write such a thing? And so I said yes. And this was the end of 2007. Fortunately, a few months beforehand, I'd been privileged to go to a meeting, a moot in Italy that Paul ran, at which Morton demonstrated a prototype of SALT, and he let slip that that they'd had to put a hook into the interpreter, that if you came out of the editor, having changed something, you could run a function to decide what to do next. And he told me what it was, but there was no documentation. He said, this is where it is, have a look, work out how to use it. So that's what happened, and that became the centre of what later became called ACRE. We called it ACRE, but APL Code Repository, good a name as any, really. Essentially what we did, every time a function was changed, it would be written back to a local file, a component file, and then ultimately written back to a FlipDB database, which was shared by all users. And the FlipDB contained the values of functions, variables, whatever else, plus plenty of metadata, so that you could rebuild the workspace from the database. The database was FlipDB. ACRE was there to manage FlipDB, so it was kind of recursive in that sense, and ACRE was also stored in FlipDB. So there was pretty much nothing outside of Dialog APL. It stayed like that for best part of 2 years, at which point we generalized it to an extent so that it could be used to manage other projects rather than just FlipDB. It had always been workspace based, continued to be so, but we allowed you to open other projects within it. The term project is something that means all sorts of different things to different people. In ACRE terms, it's a folder on the in the operating system, which sort of mirrors a namespace in the workspace. That's basically it. But the folder contains anything else apart from what's in the workspace. So it can contain all sorts of resources and assets that the program will need. Initially, for 10 years, I suppose, the code was actually being stored locally in a component file, while, as I say, it was in a FlipDB database, relational database online for other people to share with. And ACRE managed all the problems of concurrent updates and sharing and whatever else. Eventually, though, when it was about 10 years old, it was decided that there were other, possibly better tools for doing all that management, and Acre was reborn as merely a desktop application. So we shed FlipDB itself, and Acre can now link to pretty much any source code management. At the moment, all of our users are doing it with using it either merely locally or using Git or GitHub, and Acre itself is now stored on GitHub. I forgot to mention, in fact, that when it was generalized after 2 years, the one important thing was that Paul's company, Carlisle, their main application was put into Acre, and it's been managed by Acre ever since. So it's not just a local thing. That's a big application. I think that's probably all I want to say about it. And so somewhere or another, do I have a share screen? If I look at that was another thing I didn't mention. Yes, for most of its life, Acre, or for a long time, Acre was kind of object oriented. It was our own bespoke version of it. But if you opened a project, you got an object which contained all the possible commands you could do with that project. And so you could open multiple projects and have different objects floating about in the workspace. When we made it independent of FlipDB, all the commands became user commands. So there's no footprint in the workspace at all. And at the moment, it's not there. In fact, if I do that, there's nothing, no mention of A in there at all, because I haven't reinstalled it. Hang on a second. Right, if any of you read the README that was linked to on the British API Association website, you will have seen how to download and install. I'm not going to download it again. I've got one here, but I'm merely going to load this workspace, Acre DWS, in a new instance of Dialog APL, and it says immediately installed at, and that's where it's installed. If I look at options, configure user commands, we now have Acre here on the top line, providing user commands. So if we come out of there and come out of there again, go back into Dialog, this time we have too many Acre commands, about 30 of them, I think. It's too many, really, but most of them seem to be necessary at some time or another. We're not going to look at them all at the moment. I'm just going to pick up the help for one of them. Very minimal, just giving us create new project, and the syntax is create project, folder, space, and a few options. So we don't actually need anything to start with. At the moment, the workspace is completely empty. We could create a project completely empty and then start to populate it. More useful is probably that people almost certainly got some kind of code that they might want to use Acre with. So as an example, I'm just going to load the dfuns workspace. And hang on. Don't have any APL characters at the moment, for some reason. That's what I want. The split L Iota 29. Yeah. We appear to have 207 functions, 65 operators, 2 namespaces, and 11 of whatever name class 8.6 is. I'm not sure about that, but never mind. We've obviously got some namespaces. So what are they? Notes and scripts. Notes appears to have lots of things in it, and they are all, in fact, character vectors. In fact, notes dot quad NL3 is empty, and notes dot quad NL2 is big. Okay, there's 341 descriptions in there. So anyway, if I create a project from this, we're going to call it dfuns. I'll show you. I've got a folder here which is currently empty, and that's my current directory. So if I create a project, it will automatically go into there. Create project, dfuns. Right, the help told us we need a folder and a space. So, well, dfuns is distributed throughout the workspace, so we need the entire workspace. There it is, hash, create project, and it says hash, okay. First thing I'm going to do is open it again, and that will overwrite everything that we've got with what's in the project. It's read 275 items, which isn't enough. Oh, right, we've got more namespaces than we started with. I'll show you this one momentarily. It's called Quadvars. Acre has added this in order to preserve the original Quad-IO, Quad-ML, and Quad-WX that were in the project when it was created. What that's doing is, in fact, it's assigning into the 3 system variables in its parent. That's hash hash, and hash hash from a namespace in the root is the root itself. So that will reassign those variables into the root. Each time the project is opened. And we've got this other thing called acre config. Now that is just an ordinary namespace. We do have a tool as part of acre to display it. I'll talk about this later on as well. It's just showing you the contents of that namespace, which are things to do with the project itself, various parameters, but including, most importantly, the project folder and the project space. Project space is the entire workspace hash, and the project folder is called dfuns within that previously empty folder I showed you, acre projects. Okay, and the variables in notes appear to be non-existent. Notes dot quad NL2, none. Okay, 2, 3, nothing. Notes is empty, and the reason is because where we had the syntax of create project, it offered us these 3 options, one of which is variables, and the default is off. So what we need to do, in fact, is, oops, Acre projects, come out. Right, we need to kill defens, start again. Right. So clear. Probably didn't need to do that. Load defens again. No, Mr. D. Right. Create project. Defens. Hash. And we want variables on. Takes a bit longer, so it's obviously writing more this time. We'll reopen it. Defens. And better just check that to start with. Notes, there they all are. Okay. And notes itself has also got a quadvars namespace. And the reason is that its settings for quad-O, quad-ML, quad-WX are different from its parent. Now, these things are set up by Acre. You can get rid of them. You can change them. It's just an ordinary scripted namespace. But they're there just as an assistant when you start out, so that everything comes back exactly as it was when the project was first created, until you start changing it. And there's the main point, which is now everything's in the root here. So we've got lots of functions. What can we see? Anything? I happen to know something about this one, so I feel fairly okay about changing it. There we go. So come out of editing, and we get the message saved ASCAN, which was the thing I edited. First thing I'm going to do is clear the workspace, open the project again, and look at ASCAN. And sure enough, it's been changed. So I cleared the workspace, reopened the project, the changes have gone in. You might have noticed when I open the project, we don't see the same thing as we do when we load the workspace. So if I reload the workspace, actually no, and reopen the project, we do have quadLX, but it's not as in the project. It's only in the workspace. Is there something called LX? No. So what I'll do is actually capture quadLX in there. Now, capturing variables doesn't actually work. Acre doesn't know they're there, but we have a command, set changed, which says, which has actually written that back. Now, so again, clear. I don't need to be doing all these clears. It's kind of proof that it's actually working. So I've cleared the workspace, open the project again, and ALX exists. Now, it's not the quadLX of the workspace at the moment. So, but if we look back at this Acre config namespace, the last thing in there is called startup. And although this namespace is merely a mirror of the configuration file, I can show you the configuration file. If we actually open the project folder, there's the configuration file. And it's got a thing called, now this, in the workspace, it looks like APL. In the file, it's actually JSON. Doesn't make any difference. It's capable of reading either. But what we're going to do is make the startup execute the thing called LX, which is in the project, and merely save that file. I'm going to clear again, and I'm going to open the project again, reading 910 files. That's more like it. And it runs what was the Quad LX. Now, the actual Quad LX here is empty because we started in a clear workspace, and indeed we are still in a clear workspace. We're not in the dfuns workspace, we're in the dfuns project. And if we run the project command, we can see that it's in hash, and this is its project folder. Right, if I look at notes again, I don't know what any of these are actually. Never mind. Range. That's not a very big one. Oh, apparently it is. So if I change that and exit, it saved the change. So not really wanting to interfere with whatever that was, because I don't really know. We'll come out again, undo my change, so it's back as it was. So it saved the variable. Now, when we created the thing, we had to tell it specifically to save the variables, but it's now saving existing variables. But if I create, is something called this? No. So if I make that a new variable, now nothing's happening. It's not saving it. If I edit it, oh no, I can never think of anything to type. There you go. Not stored, notes.this, use set changed. Right, because it didn't already exist, Acre is not going to change it on edit. So if I use set changed on that, this is notes.this, it says it's changed it. We clear the workspace, open the project again, and notes.this exists. We can change it some more, and it continues to save. Okay, what else did I want to show you with regard to that? I can't remember. Oh yes, actually let's look at the file for notes.this. So we'll go back to the project folder. Is this it? Yes, dfuns. Right, we've seen the Acre config file. Git ignore is because Acre is currently set up to use Git, more or less by default. We don't want to be storing certain things in the project which are considered to be local, so that contains a couple of things. But APL source is the folder tree. Now we've got lots and lots of functions and operators. The file types here, APLO and APLF, represent operators and functions. within notes, which is a subfolder of APL source, we've got lots of other things, and char string here is the file type, the file extension, because what that is, which is the one I just, oh, it doesn't matter. I'll look at this one. They're all, John Scholes created all these as delimited strings, basically code return and a long character vector. So when they're in their file, they look exactly the same as they do in the workspace. Now, if I had a variable in the workspace somewhere which was not a character string, we want to be able to store it as a text string. So set changed ASD. I hope that wasn't a function. Oh no, it wouldn't have been. It would have given me an error. So I've now changed. I've saved ASD. If we look back in the folder again, and that's in the top level, we should have something called ASD, and it's got the file type of APLA. Now that's because it's an array, and if we look at it, it looks fairly a lot like IOTA2.3, which is what let's look at ASD in the workspace. That's what it looks like. If we dis it, that's what it looks like. On file, it looks like that. And this is array notation, which is more or less equivalently with acre and link, and it's decodable. You can decode this to produce exactly the same thing you started with. The square brackets indicate a multi-dimensional array. The parentheses indicate nesting, and so the whole thing just works. So that's probably about all I need to show you at the moment. Oh yes, actually ASD wasn't in the workspace to start with. So if I erase ASD and then reopen the project, ASD is still there. If I clear the workspace and reopen the project, ASD is still there. And this is because bracket erase that I used up there somewhere, it doesn't tell Acre anything. Acre knows nothing that's been erased. It's not going to be looking through hundreds and hundreds of things in the workspace to see what's missing. It requires somehow to be told. The editor tells it through the callback on coming out of the editor, but we need to tell Acre that we're erasing it. So if we erase with a square bracket, ASD, and then reload the workspace, ASD no longer exists. As I say, there's about 30 commands. I'm not going to show you the rest. There's more interesting things. I've just noticed that I'm no longer looking at the comments. So should I be looking at comments? And how do I do that? If
there is a chat button at the bottom, but the only comment has been about what about quad FR in the namespace for the quad settings.
Excellent, good question. I like the question because we put Is QuadFR namespace scope? I don't know. Anyway,
Yes.
when it is okay, right? There's probably one that does need to be added then, because the method we're using with that quad vase thing came from Carlo years ago. He demonstrated what he considered to be a serious flaw in Dialog APL, which was that if you create a namespace, a scripted namespace, you can assign into its parent. So every time you load that workspace, you can be changing stuff in the parent, and he considered it a security issue, which quite possibly is. All I saw was a useful tweak that we could get things to run under the covers without causing a fuss. So each project ends up with this quad vase file as a scripted namespace that does this, but we didn't know what to put into it. We knew quad.io and quad.ml would definitely be necessary. We added quad.wx, but you're saying quad.fr would be good. Quad.ct, I don't know. There's all sorts of things could go in there, but if anybody at all thinks that quad.fr would be useful, then that's fine. It's only created when the project is created, but if you've got a body of code in a workspace and you want to save it, then you want to save everything. So good idea. I like it. And as I say, that's why QuadVars exists, in order to save those sort of things. How are we doing for time? All right, okay. Half hour or so, less than half hour. Right, 10 minutes. 10 minutes till I should finish. There's a couple of other little quirky things I should mention. One of them, ACRES stores functions, defined operators, and scripts. Basically, that's all it stores. But there's all sorts of other things knocking about in workspaces that ACRES is not storing. And one of them, for instance, would be derived functions. Now, I can never think of a brilliant new example here, so I'm just going to use the same old thing. Plus reduction. How do we go? What is this?
Divided by the count.
Sorry, divide tally, isn't it? That's it. Yeah, there you go. Mean is that. Now, I want to set changed mean. I probably shouldn't have done that, because it's probably already in the workspace as a defined function. It didn't give me a response there, but it certainly didn't tell me I'd done it. There's something going on in the background that I haven't shown you. I'll just do this once. We've got a log being created all the time. And the last thing, penultimate thing in it, was set change wrote 0 files. So it didn't work. It won't save a derived function. There's a way around this, which I discovered about 2 or 3 years ago. And I thought at the time, I'm not sure I like this, because, and I actually emailed John Scholes and said, how disgusting is this? Do you think I should incorporate it? And he couldn't see anything particularly wrong with it. So I have saved a few of these now. So if I actually, I've erased mean, so I can look at a new one. Mean is that a left arrow? I think it is. Yep. Mean is plus reduction divide tally. Right, now, So if we do the mean of iota 99,
no right argument in your definition.
Oh, no, I spelt it wrong. That was what was wrong with it. No, indeed. No right argument. We don't need a right argument. What mean is a niladic function which returns a definition. Okay. Now, use like that, I can now actually, it saved it. So it saved it again. So it's now part of the project. Unfortunately, I've overwritten what was probably a better one. What this is, it's a niladic function which doesn't take an argument, but it returns a definition. So being niladic, it runs first. So we get mean iota 99. It creates iota 99, then says, oh, we've got a niladic function here. What should we do with it? Run it, find out what we get. We get another function. We run the function on the argument. There's not much use. It's not much benefit there, apart from the fact that Acre can store it. But it actually comes into its own if you run mean under another operator, because it's only going to evaluate it once. So it will create the definition, the derivation rather, and then it will act like any other derived function. That's one way of getting around the limitation that you can't get a useful definition out of a derived function to store. So that Dialog have said for many years they might fix that one day, but it's not necessary in this case. One other thing I just wanted to show you. We've done quad vars, we've done this. Yeah, it's actually the whole question of variables. At the beginning, Acre didn't store any variables because all the people in Carlisle were dead set against saving variables. Then when we incorporated CAS, we found that the several hundreds of variables stored within CAS needed to be stored as well. So we added variables to it. Then we took it out and made it optional. And then we put it back, and then we've taken it out again, and now it's optional again, to the extent that you need specifically to add it with set changed before Acre will start paying attention to it on changing it in the editor. So that's one thing about it. The other thing is, as I pointed out, the storage of variables. 2.5 years ago, when we became independent of FlipDB, that's when we went over to text files, and the difficulty with text files was that things such as iota 2.3 or large matrices of vectors and vectors of matrices and all sorts of things like this are difficult to manage as a text file. You can't just apply a format to it and expect to be able to get it back again, which is why we started using array notation, which I've been experimenting with for decades, but finally created a model for it. When was it? About 5-6 years ago, that I demonstrated in, well, not in, at Sicily. I wasn't there, but that's where the presentation was displayed. And Dialog have subsequently taken it on to more or less completely. It's more or less exactly the same within Link. Link uses array notation as well, with no specific differences except white space and the redundancy of some parentheses in in one place or another in both Acres version and Dialog's version, Link's version. The only real difference is in our notation for namespaces, and the Dialog's version there has probably some benefits, although I prefer what we've got here in terms of the display of it. Looks sorry, no, that's a variable anyway. What am I doing? Yeah, that's Acres Acres way of displaying a namespace. Link does it rather differently. Serialize config. It's using colon for the assignment and parentheses for the separate for the delimiters. Apart from that, pretty much the same. When one or other of these notations becomes embedded in Dialog, we'll go with whichever that one is. And as I say, the Dialog version has some merit in the sense that you can have intermediate values within the definitions, although it doesn't look like ABL. That's about it, really, I think. Yes. Oh, one other tiny little thing. Sorry, we've just added a feature. This notation, both Acres version and Link's version, is not necessarily very fast. And somebody demonstrated to us that if you save a 1 million row simple numeric matrix, it takes nobody could be bothered to wait to find out how long it takes to evaluate it. So we speeded it up a little bit in Acre, but in the interim we've added another file type which is only available on creation of the project, and it will store all pre-existing variables in the project in their own individual component files, which is kind of unfortunately getting away from the whole text file business, but as an interim measure to speed things up until array notation is written in C and part of the interpreter, then it's probably necessary. Okay. Thank you. That's me.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. I guess you're ready to take questions now.
Yeah, if you like, and I'll get rid of my screen.
In particular, was interested in why link Acre over Link. Wonder if
oh yes. Sorry. Oh, there they all are. Oh, lots of questions. Sorry. I looking at my own screen, I didn't have that up. Where should I start? Hundreds. What about qualifier? Oh, right, I've answered that one. Why Acre over Link? Right, yes. Okay, why Acre over Link? Link, as far as I know, doesn't actually store anything in terms of its own footprint. Is that the right word there? If I link a namespace and a folder, then presumably when I close a session, there's no record that Link has anything to do with that folder. And that folder is can presumably subsequently be linked to any other namespace in any other workspace. What Acre is doing is storing things as projects. And a project is expected to be anything from a small utility to a large system such as Carlisle whatever CAS stands for, which is multi-megabyte thing. And with all the resources embedded within the project. Link is doing basically what Morton showed us back in 2007 in terms of you change something in the editor and it's sent back to file. It's doing one other thing. Apparently, if you change the file, it's then shoved back into the workspace if the workspace is active, if the link is active at the time. How well that works, I don't know. That depends on some kind of a thing called a file watcher, which we don't have. Acre's scope is a project, not a namespace. Which reminds me, what I didn't show you, and I did intend to show you this, was that had I changed the project space within the configuration file, I could have got Acre to load dfns into a namespace of its own, and the tree would all have been pushed down into a lower level in the workspace, and then we could have opened dfns as a utility function in another project, or in another workspace. I didn't. Okay. That's what's happening there. I'm just looking at these questions. Does anyone want to shout anything out? Because I'm having there's a lot of questions here, and I'm not sure how far I've got. My whatever, Acre. That's Adam talking to Rich. Namespace can execute any code whatsoever. Yes, absolutely. Sure.
Bill?
Hello?
Where can I find the documentation on your work so I can go at it more leisurely?
Right. If you click the link on the webinar page, you will be taken to GitHub. If you look towards the top of the screen, you will see the wiki. Right, this is the website, Acre Source Code Manager. So if I click on that, I'm taken into GitHub, Carlisle Group, Acre Desktop. This is the README. Along the top, we have code, issues, requests, actions, projects, and wiki. And wiki is the documentation. So there it all is. Getting started, working with projects. How can I get there out of the way? Get out of the way. Item types and file types, array notation. Item names, file names, the project configuration file. It's all in there.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Josh is asking, can you talk about project dependencies in Acre?
Oh, yes. Right. One of the... I'm actually getting completely lost in this screen now. There. Go back to dfns. Right. Acre config, we have a thing called dependencies, which is currently empty. What that can be is either two strings, one of which is the name of another project, and the other one is, can I remember? oh my goodness, it's a long time since I did this. Sorry. Name and must be name and location, I imagine. I can't. I'm sorry, I can't exactly tell you, but the alternative is that this can itself be another namespace, or actually a vector of namespaces, I believe, each of which contains two things, name and something else. I do apologise. Can't remember. It's all written down in the documentation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
But basically what happens with those is that if I open a project and its dependencies parameter is not empty, then Acre will attempt to open first the projects named in its dependencies. When it's done that, it will finally open the what we can deem the main project. So if A claims to depend upon B and C will be opened first, and then A will be opened. There's another thing I didn't show you about all this, which is probably important, and the rule is that you can't open a project inside another project, because actually Acre used to do this for a while, but it was a bit hairy, as it were, in the sense that a subset of a namespace tree was then a part of another project, and it could become difficult to know where things ought to go when they were changed. So we actually overruled that, and Acre no longer allows you to hold dependencies within the project itself. They have to be siblings or in another namespace within the workspace. Yeah, sorry, I'm not 100% au fait with that anymore because I haven't used it for such a long time. How do I? Oh. I'm trying to find. Oh my goodness! Get out of the way. I've got a very small screen here, and I'm trying to find the comments again, but I'm not being very successful. Can I?
Buttons just to the left of the share screen button, I think, should pop it out.
Oh, everything appears at the top. Oh, clever stuff, isn't it? Chat. There it is. Right. Sorry. Where are we up to here? Oh dear, I should have tried to keep up.
If you stop sharing your screen, Phil, it might be easier to...
Okay, yeah, good point. Well done. Oh yeah, there it all is. Respond to up and down.
Some people have been talking about their own solutions to handling sort of meta information in projects.
Right. The names of the call.
Good one. Ellis asks, have you found any functions difficult to save? For example, we are warned about PCO in defns. Was there a warning popped up when you...
About? Sorry, there's a problem with what?
PCO in defns.
PCO? I'm not all.
Right.
What is it? Is it
PCO
a large function?
PCO is the prime function from J, which Roger has obviously made available as a D function.
Right.
And if you edit it, and you've got dfunds there, you can go into dfunds and look what the function pico says. He says some code management systems might have trouble saving this, and the reason for that is that he has extremely long local variables, which are a large collection of known primes, so that it works decently with any reasonably small number.
Right.
Just idly curious, having seen that comment from someone like Roger, who you're not going to gainsay, that if he says some code management systems might find it difficult, have you saved and reloaded Pico, and does it still work?
Oh, I see. It's a very wide function.
It's a very wide function because of the known primes that he's got into it to make it work quickly for most sensible numbers.
Right. So if I clear and open project dfunds, right. I've opened the project again. Only this time I've opened it into its own namespace. So all we've got in the workspace is a namespace called dfunds, but dfunds itself has all this other stuff in it. Right. So one of the PCO appears to be just as wide. So, how do we run it? PCO, does it tell us? I'll just give it 100 and see what it does, shall I?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
The 100th is okay. So,
yeah.
Oh, okay. Presumably we want iota. Presumably we want 1 plus there. Yes. Okay. So that looks like it's working.
Yeah. Yeah. No, just curious.
And the 1,000th is that, and the 10,000th is that. Yeah, seems to work.
Good.
It probably wouldn't get very far if we were storing quad CR, but we're storing quad NR, so it's reasonably. It's no longer than the actual amount of text in the function, not padded with millions of spaces.
Bill, Jake here. Somebody's mentioned Acre Tools. You'd like to talk about that?
Okay, is Paul here by any chance? Or Mansour? Because he wrote that. But right, Acre Tools is a project, an Acre project, which itself is a kind of interface between Acre and GitHub or Git, and it imposes a workflow on the user, which the best thing to do would probably be to look it up in GitHub and read the documentation there, because I'm afraid I don't know how it's progressed over the past year, I'm afraid. But that's what it is. It's an interface between Acre and Git.
Okay. Curtis is asking how long a history of changes is kept for.
Oh, right. Okay. That's another thing I didn't point out. The create project, let's get this back. There were 3 options on the create project command. The variables one I showed you, the other 2 I didn't. Case code is, I'll take half a minute to tell you this. If I have something in a namespace called foo with FOO in lowercase, and another thing called FOO in uppercase and capital F, 2 small O's. We've got 8 possibilities there. In Windows, at least, they would overwrite one another because Windows won't allow you to have multiple files, even with the same name, all except for the casing. So what a case code is, it appends to the function name or the name of the item, whatever it is, a code which is an encoding of the upper lowercase binary difference there. And by default, it's off. If you're going to store lots of things, I actually have it on within Acre because I quite often have a function which starts with a capital letter, which accesses another sub-function maybe that starts with a lowercase letter, but is otherwise the same. So perhaps it's not a good practice, but it works like that. Keep history, again, off. If keep history is on, every time you make a change in the editor, not only does Acre store the new value to the text file, it also stores that same value in a component file for that particular item, and it will just go on adding them on until you decide you've got too much and you decide to delete it. And there's Acre dot undo, which is can't see it here. Sorry.
See it.
Acre undo, and there is redo, and they maintain a undo redo stack for each and every item in that you change in the workspace. But you can always throw it away, and it's hidden from Git in the Git ignore file. So it's in a subfolder of the project, which Git can't see. So that's what we do. Okay. Does that answer it?
I think the question was, how long do you keep it for?
Oh, how long do you keep it? And as long as the user wants to keep it. Unless we might well get rid of. Yes, we know, because Acre doesn't know anything about Git. We keep it forever until the user decides to get rid of it. And the command is what the hell was the command? Sorry. Purge history. That's it. The command purge history. You can purge history for the project, or you can purge history for an individual item. So at the moment, it's not significant at the moment because I'm not keeping the history within the dfunds project. We can change the. Oh, we've got it there, have we? Dfunds dot. Within here, if within the file that this represents, the configuration file, if we change that to on, it will start saving them. If we change it to off, it will stop saving them. And if we use the purge history command, it will just destroy all of them, but start again unless you turn it off. So I suppose eventually you just run out of storage in your computer. It goes from one session to another. So obviously, if you make a dozen changes to a function in one session, you will have appended a dozen new components to that component file. If you turn off your computer, come back, reopen the project, they're all still there. So you can go back to the first change you actually made to that particular item.
Josh is saying that from the GitHub documentation, the session log only retains the last 1,000 rows.
Right, okay. There's okay, what's going on there? I am not sure. Let's do that again and have another look. Right, okay. Because I'd reinstalled Acre, it stopped saving it to the file. If you run the command Acre log file, then it returns the name of the log file, and if it doesn't exist, it creates it. So I've only just created it there, so we've gone through this entire session without a log file. The session one, it only retains 1,000 rows, but once you have a log file, if you create it with the log file command, then it just goes on adding to it forever. And after a while, it starts warning you in the log that it's getting a bit big. I think it's after the log file, which is a megabyte, it starts warning you when you start up a session by placing its own size within the log. But you need to be looking at it. So here we go. If I log show again, I don't know how big this thing is now. End. Oh, I can't see it. I can't actually see how big that is. As I say, I'm working on a small screen here, and I can't see the bottom of my session. Nope. That'll do. Oh, cool. Well, we've actually got 704 rows in the log at the moment. But it reaches 1,000, it starts dropping them off the bottom. So, yeah.
Ray Cannon was asking if you've used it under Linux or just Windows.
I'm afraid I haven't used it under Linux. There's nothing in it that is specific to Windows except the business of case codes. And I think if obviously if you're strictly within Linux, you don't need case codes ever, because their file names are what's the word? Case sensitive. Whereas within Windows, I think the documentation has a warning about it, that if you switch a project from Linux to Windows, you might find things disappear because the files overwrite one another. But apart from that, there should be no difference whatsoever. There are no, sorry, that is up until approximately version, let's have a look. I'll have to look at the background to tell you this. Set. Right. Yeah. Okay. Before version 15, Acre was using the Windows. I can't remember what it's called now. Some bunch of functions for file access within Windows. But since then, since Richard came up with the Quad N enhancements, everything's done within APL, so we don't need that. But Acre was the latest. The Acre desktop was developed when 17.0 was available, but it was developed in 16. Subsequent to that, when 17.1 became available, we made it, we pushed it back, and I added lots and lots of emulators so that it will now run in 14. Even though where possible, it's using the latest changes to Dialog. For earlier version, it was required to be able to run in 14.0, so it still does. Which is why the installation thing is actually called Acre 14.0. That's the earliest it works in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can't see any more questions. Unless anybody wants to sing out in case I've missed anything. Richard, you've been keeping a good eye on this.
You did ask the most recent question, really, from Ray. And yeah, there's plenty of stuff in the chat log, which if you manage to keep and publish it later.
Okay, well, if we're done, all that remains is to thank Phil for that.